Hi guys, so this is the last chapter of the textbook, chapter 16. Congratulations. This is obviously not going to be heavy content this week. This is all about how to write a APA style report. Um, and so we're going to just fly through a lot of this. Um, this is the last step of the research process, step 9, or well, sort of the last step. It's a continuation process, right? So it's circular. So it's not really the last step, but it's step 9 in what we talked about way at the beginning of the textbook, if you remember back that far. And so the idea here is to have a very structured process that we can use to produce a well-defined report. It has sections that are clearly labeled and have very specific content in each sections, so we know where to find these things and um, how to. It makes it easier to understand and compare with other research, and it just helps produce clear and concise reports, and basically describes why the research was done, how it was done, and then the results that were produced from it. Um, there are only 4 objectives for this chapter, and they are right here. They're also in your textbook, of course. And then 16.1 is obviously what we're going to start with, and that's just talking briefly about the goal of this research report. Actually, I'm going to turn this low battery thing off so that it will quit doing that dimming thing, so you guys don't have to see me doing that. So the remember that one of the basic tenets of science and scientific investigation is to make science public, right? It needs to be public. And so your research process is not truly finished until you've made your findings and your research and what you've done available to the scientific community. And so um, there is not a learning objective for this section. For this first section, this is just kind of an introduction to all of this. And so, um, again, the basic purpose of a good research report is to provide 3 kinds of information. So these 3 things have to be in a good research report. What was done, which includes a detailed step-by-step process of of the research process of what happened, what you did, and why, and then what was found, which includes an objective description of the outcome, and that's going to include the measurements and the statistical summary and interpretation of those statistics and of those results. And then lastly, it needs to include how the study is related to other knowledge in the area that you're studying. Um, and so that basically involves drawing connections between your present research study and past knowledge, which, as you may remember from your research proposal, that's part of the literature review process in your introduction of your research report. But you also need to bring that full circle and have that at the end of your research report when you have actually completed research. When you're talking about your results and your conclusions, and your discussion section where you're talking about the ways that you could have improved your research, or what further research could look into and things like that, that all needs to relate back to past knowledge as well. So it provides that foundation for your study, but it also needs to be connected back to show what future research should look like and could look like. So the definition for, or of rather, a research report, again, it's just a written description of the research study. These are general components, again, that need to be included. So it needs to have a clear statement of the purpose of the research. It needs to review the relevant background literature that led to that particular study, which again, we've talked about. And then I just realized it turned on low power mode and I did not mean to hit that. And then also a description of the research methods that were used, the summary of those research results, and the discussion and interpretation of the results. And I would also add to that last part, maybe even an application component if that applies. So for this introduction, just to kind of get you guys thinking about all of this, think through these 4 questions. Why is it important to have a standard for professional writing? Obviously, the first thing that comes to my mind is that ability to quickly see things and look for things and understand things. Because if it's all the same standard, you're not going to be completely thrown off or confused by something, or not know where to look for something that you need for your own research or just reviewing the research at hand. But of course, there's many other reasons as well that you might be able to think of. What is the challenge that writers face when using a style standard? How can practice or experience improve writing? And how can familiarity with a style standard improve the writing process? So just some things to think through. We're going to continue on to 16.2 because this is such a short, that was such a short video. And so we're going to jump right into APA guidelines for writing style and format. This is going to cover learning objective 1 from this chapter, which is describing basic elements of APA style, including the use of verb tenses and the guidelines for citations and how to apply that in your own writing. Overall, you can, if you have any questions about any of this or want to see any like other examples besides what your textbook talks about or what we talk about in the videos, apastyle.org is a great resource. You also have Appendix D in your textbook that is an example of a complete research paper to guide you and answer any possible questions you may have about APA style writing. Now, there are some elements of the APA style that we need to talk about. There's 4 general elements of style. One is that it's impersonal, so it's clear, it's concise, it's objective, it's simple, it's straightforward. It's not a journal entry, right? You're not going to use terms like lit or trying to think of other current words that people use that you would not use in a scientific or APA style paper. I can't even think of one off the top of my head, but you guys understand that there's a very different type of wording you're going to use for academic writing versus a journal entry, right? This is not, you're not putting your own personal flair. It's not creative writing. You don't need any stories. You don't need a big creative intro or anything like that. It is very, again, simple and straightforward, basic language. And then the second element is verb tense. And so pretty much the entire paper is going to be in past tense, the entire report, because anytime you're talking about research that's already been done, that's going to be past tense. If you're talking about the research that you did, it's going to be past tense, except for the results section. When you talk about your results, that will not be in past tense, in the sense that you'll say this. I mean, you could use past tense, honestly, you could use past tense, but a lot of researchers will also use more present tense when they say, the results here show blah, blah, blah. So they will talk about it in present tense, just to distinguish it from the research that has already been done by other researchers. That is, again, that just makes sense because it's research that has already been done. It's results that have already been found. It's things that have already happened. So of course you're going to use past tense. So you wouldn't say the participants are, or the participants go into the room, you would say the participants went or the participants were, things like that. Also, along the language thing, the third element here is you're reducing biased language. That makes that really just boils down to being respectful, making sure you're using the right terms for race or gender or age or whatever. Making sure that it is, again, unbiased and objective and respectful, and using the correct proper um, terms for things. Your book has a great example of all of that here in this paragraph. It also talks about acknowledging that there was actual people that participated in your study. So instead of saying the participants were run in the study, you would say that the students completed the survey. Again, because they are people, they're human beings, it all comes down to respect. Um, the last element is citations, which we've talked about a lot in this class, but again, it identifies the authors and the year of publication, and it provides enough information for a reader to locate in the references page at the end of the report. Again, this could be you're citing things for background for your hypothesis. It could be that you're establishing a basis or support for claims or facts in your report. And it's also, of course, to give others credit for what they have found or what research they have done. There are two formats commonly used for citations. Either you're stating a fact or making a claim in the text, and you're going to cite the source and with parentheses at the end of that sentence, which a lot of you guys have seen. We'll show examples of that in a second. And then the second format is when the author is used as the subject of the sentence, or the source is used as the subject of the sentence. So James, that's the author's last name, found that blah, 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 or Smith found that blah, blah, blah. And the year would be in parentheses after the last name. So let me see. Okay. So anytime you use the two key phrases that you need to be aware of, if you're using the term or the terms, it has been shown, or it has been demonstrated, or it is well known, or it is well demonstrated, or everyone knows, or whatever the words are you're using. If you're using things like that, if you're stating generalized facts or information, you need to be able to cite that information, something to support that information. Another key phrase that people use that you're going to need a citation is previous research has found, or previous research shows. Anytime you reference that, if you say the words previous research, you have to cite the research. You have to give an example, at least one example of that previous research. It doesn't have to be an exhaustive list, but at least one citation for at least one source that goes along with that. Now, before we get to the rules there, I want to show the examples of citations so that you can know what we're talking about. So this is a great tool. This is in your book, of course, but screenshot it, save it. This is a really great, concise table here to help show you. You see that there's the number of authors, and it shows you how you would cite it in the first time in the text. So remember, the first time that you quote it, or that you cite it, rather, not quote, cite, you have to list all of the authors. The subsequent times in the text, so after that first initial citation, any other time you cite that same source in the paper, you can just use et al. Okay. Now notice in the very last row, it says for 6 or more authors that you can just start with et al. For the first time in the text. And that is the APA format policy at the moment. Okay. Sorry, guys. Hold on. There you go, baby. My daughter is homesick. And so that is the APA format, but I would caution you unless there's like 20 authors for that citation, I would list all of the author last names the first time. And then after that, you can use et al. Because it's just a simple, it's not a huge extra step to take. And I think um, it can help distinguish it between other articles, especially if you have the same authors in several different references or citations. It can help distinguish that one. And also, it just gives full credit to those authors. But that's just my own personal preference. Some other researchers and psychologists would agree with me, and others would say it doesn't matter. But that's just my personal preference. Um, and then you can see the first two, or I'm sorry, the second and third columns is for when it's in text. The last two columns is when it's just in parentheses at the end of the sentence, when it's not the subject of the sentence. Okay, and so back to this last slide here. Some general rules for the uses of references is when it says be conservative and says select only those references that are useful and contribute to your arguments. When it says be conservative, it doesn't mean use less sources overall, like don't cite things. That's not what it's saying. I don't want you to mistake that and think that you don't need to cite your sources and give credit to your sources of information. When in doubt, if you ever are presenting information in a paper and you think, do I need to cite this? Yes. If you ever have a doubt, cite it. If you think it sounds like something that probably needs to be supported in some way, or otherwise it's going to look like it's an opinion, then cite it. Cite it. Find something to support it, and some sort of reference, and cite it. What the be conservative part is saying is, when I said you can just find one source to support it, if it says previous research has shown, you can just find one or two articles that would support that and reference those. You don't need to provide 10 studies to support that one statement. And that's what it means by be conservative. As a general rule, also paraphrase in your own words from articles as much as possible rather than using a direct quote. And I've talked about this before in other videos, but use direct quotes only when it is necessary. If you can word it in your own words in another way and paraphrase it in some way, do that. That is much better than having a paper be full of quotations. It makes it harder to understand. It doesn't flow as well. And because the writers of that article are not you, and their article was about something similar but different than what you're writing about, and so you need to be able to put it in your own words. It's also a great way to make sure that you understand those quotes and what that research is saying. If you find that you can't put it in your own words, then you may need help understanding exactly what they're saying. So overall, quotations should be used sparingly. Again, only if it's absolutely necessary to use a direct quote. And remember, if you're using that direct quote, you have to put it in quotation marks. And at the end, in addition to the author, last name, and year, you also have to provide a page number. It talks about that later, but just wanted to go ahead and throw that out there since we were talking about it. So for word processing documents and typing it up, basic guidelines for the settings is that everything is double spaced except for any tables that you put in your document. Everything is set double spaced from the very beginning of the paper to the very end. It should be evenly double spaced. There's not extra spaces between paragraphs. There's not extra spaces after headings. There's not extra spaces at the top or bottom of the page. It is evenly double spaced throughout, except for the title page. Usually is that information is usually put towards the middle of the page, but it's still double spaced in between the lines for that. 1-inch margins overall on the whole paper. It's left aligned, so everything's aligned to the left side of the paper. There's no hyphenation where if like you start typing out a word at the end on the right side and you hyphenate it and you continue the word on the next line. No, you don't do that. You just move the whole word to the next line, which computers do that on their own these days now, most of the time, so you don't have to worry about that. Make sure you indent the first line of each paragraph. A lot of you guys, I've noticed in a lot of writing and students over the last year or two, don't indent their paragraphs anymore. I'm not really sure why. So indent either 5 to 7 spaces or just tab. And then the font and typeface should generally be 12 point Times New Roman. There are a few other approved options that you can find if you look up that apastyle.org. But generally speaking, that's what most people use is 12 point Times New Roman. And the reason for all of this is that it makes it neater, it makes it cleaner looking, it makes it easier to, like, again, see, find, understand, but it also leaves plenty of blank space for people, professors, editors, reviewers to edit and write comments and things in the document. And again, it just helps it be more organized and clear and concise. For the different pages of the report or manuscript, title page is page 1. The abstract is on the next page, page 2. And that's that summary and has the word abstract at the top. Then page 3 starts the body of your paper. And that's has those 4 sections. And as many pages as it takes to do these 4 sections. The introduction, which is your literature review, your method section, where you talk about how you did your research, your results section, which obviously talks about what you found, and your discussion section, which interprets those results. That's your 4 sections: introduction, method, results, and discussion. There's other subsections you can throw in there, but that's the basic 4. Then whenever that part is done, the body of the paper is done, then you start a new page, and that will be your references page with references at the top and the list of all your references in alphabetical order by the first author's last name. And then you'll have any tables will be after that on a new page. Any figures that you have will be after that on a new page with captions for those figures. And then if there are any appendices that you referenced in your paper, those would be last, again, on a new page. So that is it, basic rundown of that. So what are the 7 parts of a manuscript? We literally just went over that. Title page, abstract, body of the paper or the text, references, tables, figures, and appendices or appendix, if any. So we have our learning check really quickly, which is just to make sure you understand the basic formatting things. So which of the following is a proper way to cite a source in a research report when the author's name appears as the subject of the sentence? So if you're using their name as the subject of a sentence, then the year is just in parentheses after the name. So Smith, 2015, found that people did this, blah, blah, blah. For this one, which of the following is the proper way to cite a source with 2 authors in a report when the authors' names are in parentheses, so it's outside the body of the sentence? That is the second one here, Smith and Jones, 2015. So you would say, researchers found that people, blah, 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 and then at the end of that sentence, you would put that in parentheses right there, and then the period would be after that closed parentheses, after the year. You use the ampersand sign in between Smith and Jones, not the word and, for the citation in the parentheses like this. If you were typing it in text, like up here, you would actually use the word and. The second time you cite a publication with 4 authors in your report, what should be included? And of course, we hopefully know that's the et al. After, because it's the second time you're citing it, so you don't have to list all of them. You just use the first author's last name and then et al. And then the date, or year rather. So that is it for the first half of chapter 16. So if you guys have any questions, I am here.